أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. My name is Iman and I'm honored to be your host tonight. I want to start off by thanking everyone for joining us here this evening. We all recognize that countering Islamophobia is of the utmost importance for American Muslims, and there are arguably no individuals who have done more work and dedicated more time to this effort than some of the folks we have here tonight. This includes Dr. Hatem Bazian, who founded this center, our dear keynote and in 2013 from Irvington Masjid and has been leading prayers at SBIA. Please welcome to the stage, Hassan.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. يا أيها الذين آمنوا استعينوا بالصبر والصلاة إن الله مع الصابرين. ولا تقولوا لمن يقتل في سبيل الله أموات بل أحياء ولكن لا تشعرون. ولنبلونكم بشيء من الخوف والجوع ونقص من الأموال والأنفس والثمرات وبشر الصابرين الذين إذا أصابتهم مصيبة قالوا إنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون. أولئك عليهم صلوات من ربهم ورحمة وأولئك هم المهتدون. In the name of Allah, the most kind, the most merciful. O you who believe, seek help through patience and prayer. Surely Allah is with those who are patient. Do not say of those who are slain in the way of Allah that they are dead. Instead, they are alive, but you do not perceive. Surely we will test you with a bit of fear and hunger, and loss in wealth and lives and fruits, and give good tidings to the patient, who, when a suffering visits them, say, we certainly belong to Allah, and to Him we are bound to return. Those are the ones upon whom there are blessings from their Lord, and mercy as well. And those are the ones who are on the right path. Sadaqallah al-Azim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Hassan. I'd now like to welcome Dr. Hatem Bazian. Dr. Hatem needs no introduction, but I personally believe it's important to recognize his longstanding commitment to supporting and fighting for Muslim Americans and Muslims all around the world. Dr. Hatem is co-founder and faculty member at Zaytuna College. He is a lecturer in the departments of Near Eastern and Asian American and Asian Diaspora Studies at the University of California, Berkeley. In 2009, Dr. Hatem founded the Islamophobia Research and Documentation Project at the Center for Race and Gender at UC Berkeley. In 2012, he launched the Islamophobia Studies Journal, which is published biannually. In addition to all this, he is founder and national chair of American Muslims for Palestine, board member of the Islamic Scholarship Fund and the Muslim Legal Fund of America, president of the Dollar for Deen charity, and chair of Northern California Islamic Council. Now, please welcome Dr. Hatem Bazian.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let me just get the line correct. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Salatu wa salamu ala khair al-mursaleen wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. It's really good to have everyone with us today. We tried to do the fundraising and the gathering for the center before Ramadan, because as many of us are waiting Ramadan next week. So I'm going to run with what we do in the center so people understand the type of work that is being done. And also ask you for donations. So we're not going to do the auction, right? I'm not going to tell you that God is waiting at the door, and if you don't donate, God's going to be angry with you. Right? So we're not going to do that. We're just going to tell you what we do. And also, if you want, those two tables have the articles that we published in the journal. These are academic articles, peer-reviewed articles. We published 119 peer-reviewed articles, almost more than anyone across the world that publishes on Islamophobia, more than the OIC, which is the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, representing 55 Muslim majority countries. They have not published on Islamophobia as much as we have done with the small engine that is the Islamophobia Studies Center. So if we could get the presentation up on the... So it's research, education, networking, data publication, and policy. So if you are watching, this is the QR code, so you could actually take the QR code and donate, and I will be speaking and giving you what we do, and as I speak, you could donate in that way. What we do, right? That's a big question. First is the Islamophobia Studies Journal. It's the only academic journal on the subject of Islamophobia anywhere in the world. So just to have this journal, we launched it in 2012, and now we're in volume 8.1. So we already published 8 volumes, and literally I'm editing the next 8.2 volume with 13 articles that are right now under review. There isn't a subject on Islamophobia except we published an academic article on it. Yesterday I gave the khutbah about Islamophobia, and one person asked me about, how about the Uyghur? Why didn't you mention that in the khutbah? I said, just the fact that it did not go through the countries, we already actually published on the Uyghur and the situation in China, and most likely we'll be following that with a full report. We publish full reports and research. These are country-specific. We try to intervene where countries have a endemic Islamophobia. So in 2017, we published the first comprehensive report on India. And that now is being cited and replicated, and people are taking from that. On India, we published one on Russia. Just yesterday, we had a discussion about Sweden. We have a report that is coming out on France, and definitely we'll follow up with a full report on the Uyghur to try to get that research and material in there that would be quoted. We launched ISRA, International Islamophobia Studies and Research Association. This is the way for any academic field to be recognizable, which means that faculty who are engaged in the research and graduate students, you have to have a professional association. It gives recognition, it gives legitimacy. It also provides that there is a place where ideas could be shared and people can come and present their research. So last year we launched the association in a conference in Ibn Khaldun University in Turkey. And this year our conference will be in Berkeley in May 5th through the 7th. and have almost 40 different research papers. Just as a heads up, even the Foreign Ministry of Qatar applied and submitted a panel to discuss the development of the Qatar World Cup and to see how Islamophobia that they had to deal with during that period. So again, this is a field that is expanding. And 2024, we will be back to Sarajevo, the site of last genocide in Europe, where you had 300,000 Muslims that were committed to genocide at the time, where we need to continue to engage with it. So again, this is part of the academic association. We do host visiting scholars and graduate students. For those who have an iPhone or Android, we still are working and getting data from the Islamophobia reporting app. All right. So if you did not download it, make sure to download it, because data needs to constantly be collected to find out what is taking place, and you could report both in Arabic and in English. We have a community partnership with a large number of organizations, both locally and nationally. Academic writing, so we do provide fact sheet, book chapters and articles. Bibliography, we jointly work with Othering and Belonging to actually put out a bibliography on Islamophobia. So if you're doing research, there's a full bibliography that could actually start you into work. Peer review journals and book by publishers. We actually have a good relationship with book publishers. If somebody submits a manuscript to them on Islamophobia, they send the manuscript to us to review it, whether it's actually worthwhile to publish or not, which means they look at us as the go-to credibility for the book, because you don't want to publish a book on a subject and the Islamophobia Study Center and the association says that this is actually a book that is not worthwhile to buy, and therefore it sinks. So now we are receiving these books that are in manuscript for publication, and then conferences and workshops. So again, as I speak, this is our donations. What we do, it's research hours. That's how you calculate what you do. Every research hour is about $50. That's how much it costs. So one report is about 600 hours of research that goes on. The India report took us 3 years of research. Right? And you might wonder, why is that much needed? Because it's deliberate, systematic work. India is very difficult to collect data. How to look at the data, you have the data that you publish have to be certified or at least authenticated from 2 sources, because you don't want to put something out in such a way. One journal volume is about 400 research hours. You do the initial submission, you do initial peer review, it comes back, they go and try to make some changes based on the recommendation. Then after that, you go to the editing stage. Once that editing stage, it goes back and forth a few times until you get into the copy edit stage. So it's a very slow, methodical process that requires a lot of time. For the report, you always have to add 200 hours of design. And anyone that works with designing a flyer, designing a 150-page report is tooth and ask Hani in terms of, because he's our designer that works on designing the report. And usually you have to work with multi-participant in trying to actually get the correct type of design on it. And a conference, again, is equal to about 500 research hours. So if you could do 1,000 research hours, 500, 200, whatever you could do, by all means, this is the engine in terms of what the center does in terms of its work. Now, many of you possibly have followed Ilhan Omar when he introduced the bill for a monitoring office in the State Department to monitor Islamophobia. Right? Now, she took one of our survey, one of the key pieces that in the survey, and she actually spoke of it in the floor of the Congress, and then she tweeted it out. It said, according to this study from Stanford and the University of California, Berkeley, again, it's our program with Dr. Rania Awad from Stanford. So we did a lot of the work and we published it together. So she said, according to the study from Stanford and University of California, Berkeley, more than 80% of American Muslims feel that Islamophobia is not taken seriously by civil society, corporate, and political leadership. So that was in the floor of the Congress, tweeted out, and all of your congressional leaders on the Democratic side nationally tweeted this, and that's how, or one of the impetus for the bill that's passed in this sense. So research can impact policy, especially if you intervene in the correct way. On your table, we're still collecting survey on Muslims in the tech industry. All right, that's a survey. So if you work in the tech industry, we're still trying to get the data on what is happening with the tech industry on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, because Muslims are facing internal pressure, but also censorship outside in relations to their engagement. And the two issues so far that we're getting some of the data, both if you speak on Hindutva or if you speak on Palestine in the tech industry, you're going to be censored. All right? While the institutions within the tech industry allow you to speak on any issue, but as soon as you speak on those two issues, you face censorship internally. So we're still trying to reach to 500 responses in terms of the data to have a substantial number for us to respond. So it's on your table for the research to do so. Islamophobia, Muslim Safety and Violence Survey, that's the full survey. Challenging Islamophobia. This is our sister Amina Salama who did this with Naveed Buckley, who's in Canada, also participating in the work on Islamophobia. We published Understanding Christian Zionism and how rallying evangelical Christian Zionism that promotes Islamophobia as part of this millenarian end of time scenario and gets to be every Sunday among the evangelicals. That becomes the point of why we need to support war intervention. So it's important. And then Israel, India, and the Islamophobic alliance. We are seeing the alliance between the Hindutva PGP party and Israel and Zionism, and it's beginning to make impact here domestically in the United States. COVID-19 and India's Islamophobia. Russian Islamophobia is another report from Iskandar Abbasi, who's actually from South Africa, and now he's located back to LA. He finished his PhD, so he did his work on, or one of the report, Islamophobia in Russia, which is something that has a long history. Russia have had a constant entanglement in Chechnya, but also in the areas that they took over from the Ottoman in the capitulation treaties of 1776 and thereafter. So that relationship of how to examine it with a much longer historical durée. Just 5 months ago, we published the Canadian Islamophobia Industry, Mapping Islamophobia Ecosystem in the Great White North by our colleague. She's on the board of the ISRA, Islamophobia International Studies and Research Association. She's a professor in Wilfrid Laurier University in Toronto. So she actually testified in the Canadian Parliament on the report, and it's now really one of the most important pieces on researching a comprehensive analysis and understanding of the Islamophobia in Canada. So again, this is the type of report, and Canada has already appointed an Islamophobia monitoring person that they appointed, and immediately she got attacked by the Islamophobic industry in Canada as well as the United States. But I think the response to the attack managed to maintain her in her position. And again, she uses our material, and we have relationship with the type of work that they're advocating in Canada. So the plan for 2023, we will be issuing 2 reports, one in the tech industry and France. These are already in the pipeline. We're still collecting the data. We're transforming many of our articles into info videos. So during Ramadan, one of our fundraising campaign is to try to break down some of these research pieces that are deployed for universities to make it into digestible info videos between 1 to 3 minutes, where people, again, we critique the social media, but people watch more TikTok than possibly a professor speaking for 2 hours, right? But so how to translate 119 journal articles into info video. We already have done about 6 in the past, but to transfer 119 would require resources. We will be publishing 2 volumes of the Islamophobia Journal. International Islamophobia Studies Research and Association Conference, May 5th through 7th in Berkeley, May 2024 in Bosnia. So those are also in the pipeline. Develop digital archive for Islamophobia studies field. Develop the Encyclopedia of Islamophobia. So this is actually a proposal to put to the UC Press to have an encyclopedia on Islamophobia, where you actually begin to have entries that will be authoritative from researchers and individuals that are engaged in the subject. So definitely Khaled will be recruited to write one on Islamophobia in the sports, because that's one of the areas that also is his impact. Maybe not boxing, I don't know about that, but for sure. Islamophobia certificate program, we began to start work on that last year, but we're gonna try to make more effort to create a certificate, especially targeted for HR, human relations offices, also individuals that deal with Muslims. I'm very critical of the diversity, equity, and inclusion, because many of the universities, they think if you just put a woman with a hijab on the recruitment brochure, or if you go through the what you call the cafeteria, and all of a sudden you find smiling Muslim faces, that's diversity, equity, and inclusion. We need to change this. This is actually inclusion by means of exclusion, because you're included symbolically, right, while you're excluded structurally, right? And again, you could see how this functioned. There are 45,000 people that died in the Turkish earthquake. I did not receive a single email in University of California, Berkeley, just to express sympathy with what happened, that there is major crisis, major death in Turkey and Syria, and that we recommend or share these are places that you could donate in expression sympathy for the death in Syria and Turkey. That shows that the university does not have Muslims in their mind. So you die, you're just a number, right? While in other elements, we receive almost every email. Even if a cat is stuck on the tree, we might receive an email how we need to express sympathy to the realm of the cats, and try to actually include them in our thoughts and prayers. Nothing against cats, right? Some of our best friends are. Muslims are a cat people, right? From a book, right? You know, you cannot read the seerah without Abu Huraira, right? The narrator of the most hadith, like the father of kitten, because he used to carry a kitten with him and so on. But again, this is where we need to have a way how these certification programs will address these gaps that exist. And then last, we just recently joined CARE. They have a program to address the new arrival of Afghan arrivals, immigrants, and refugees. So we took a piece on Afghan youth mentorship program to try to provide for them a way to come to the university, get some possibly support of application to the university, writing statement of purpose, how to apply to the university for a newly incoming refugee population is very difficult. And we know that the Bay Area received a large number of arriving Afghan refugees, and CARE have taken the lead with UC San Diego. So we are partnering with them to take that portion that deals with university access and mentorship. So the journal, these are the covers. We try as much as possible to create original art for the covers, which becomes symbolic. Early on, we have an Asian artist that was actually drawing these into art pieces and then using that for the cover of the journal. And then we have a cartoonist from Brazil that were doing cartoon project for Islamophobia through, or responded to Islamophobia through cartoons. So these are how we try to bring different participants and different contributors to the field. Our journal is open source. In 2020 were the last time we actually were publishing hard copies. In 2021, we went into open source. As open source in the first year, you could see our download, academic download for these journals, 4,130% increase. And Up to this point, we have, just before I spoke, just for this year, we're up to about 86,000 in terms of download. If you think, compare it to other journals that are well established, we're just way ahead in relations to download and open source, which means that our footprint is global and the access is across the world by means of open access. And literally on a monthly basis, we get between 10 to 12,000 access to our material from across the globe in an open access. So that's a very important and significant development. So Islamophobia reporting app, we do put together the data and we share it with some way to represent it so it'll be easily digestible and usable by people. We do the Islamophobia top 10 every year. Again, this gives us a snippet that people can access. And this past year, as all of us know, FIFA World Cup in Qatar made the Western world again go back into their racist norms. Like I said, Western press is not accidentally racist, it's the norm. They represented Qatar with images in the front pages of the German press as terrorists. The Finnish TV, when the Moroccan players were dancing with their mother, put a picture of monkeys and saying, you know how they stick together like monkeys, right? These are, and they said, oh, this was unintended joke, that it did not land correctly. That's basically saying that we don't get a joke, right? They did not really apologize for just being basically racist, right? If you're comparing donkeys to monkeys, you could say it did not land right, but when you use human beings and use monkeys, that is not something that did not land right. And the editor, again, said that it's a joke that did not land, right? Maybe they shook with Dave Chappelle or Chris Rock about making jokes on the TV in the news. This is a news segment, not a segment that should be demonizing a whole population, a moment of celebration for the Muslim world, the world in general. This picture, they said, is the worst moment in the history of the World Cup. Now, Messi did not object. The Argentinian did not object. They actually have painted a massive mural in the middle of Buenos Aires in Argentina with Messi wearing the bishop, right? And the Argentinians went and bought the bishop as a way of spread. They saw it as the Qatari honoring their hero by dressing him, the prince dressing him with the bishop, right? The Western press could not have it, right? So again, they went back to racism as we see it. So this is the top 10 list. We put it out annually, 2020, 2021, and 2022. And our colleague, Enes Barakli and Farid Hafiz, they put together the European Islamophobia report, and we publish it jointly with them. So our center, ISRA, and their Islamophobia. So this covers 38 countries in Europe. Islamophobia, where we have a scholar that writes about it, and both Farid and Enes constantly participate in all of the conferences that we have. And so again, this is just giving you what we're doing and asking you for your support. So if you think any pieces of what we do deserve your support and it's something that you want us to continue to work, by all means, I'm not going to auction how much you were going to do for this or this. You see the work, you see the impact. We have made Islamophobia Studies Center as the go-to place for any work or every work on Islamophobia. And again, this work, alhamdulillah. So resources equal research, education, data, networking, publication, and policy. If you want to change policy, you have to do the research. I am all for feelings, but you cannot go and advocate in Congress by only mere feelings. You need to substantiate data, and that data requires research and methodological engagement, and you need scholars' stamp on it. Many of us speak about trickle-down economics. Again, we could blame Stanford, because trickle-down economics against economists from Stanford, and now still people use trickle-down economics. 30 years of data shows how horrible it is, but yet people still catch on it. Clash of civilization, the same thing. Professors that have put this clash of civilization It's a clash of ignorance, and many who look at the Muslim world look through the clash of civilization. So the QR code is there. It's all on your table. So any and all your support will have an impact on our work in the Islamophobia Studies Center. جزاكم الله خير. السلام عليكم.
Thank you, Dr. Hatem. We're actually going to take a quick 5-minute break to pray Maghrib. So if you could all join us in the room in the back. Like I said, you can go through the back door on the left, or you can go through the hallway, and it's the door on your left, and we'll pray Maghrib. And join us back here and for Professor Khaled Beydoun's talk. Thank you.
Check, check. Hello, hello, hello. 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 Check, check. Testing. Check, check. Hello. Hello, hello. Testing, test, test. Test, check, check. Mic check, check, check. Testing, testing. 1, 2. Bismillah. Hello, hello. Check, check. Mic check. Testing 1, 2. Bismillah. Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello, hello. Check, check.
Gotta make it date on the calendar. On site today or the same, yeah, the same. Yeah, I know. Okay, so then September 15th. Don't do it or do it. Yeah.
Money is an issue. Like
Money is always an issue, but it's not going to be that expensive.
how much?
Just for lights?
No, it's like a TV screen, big TV screens.
Instead of the screen,
Instead of this on, like this.
Instead of screen, you get a big LED.
Like 2 LED screens like that.
Oh, yeah,
Is it
yeah.
an LED screen right now?
No, this is simple like that.
Does it make a big difference?
Quality is, I mean, not big, but
Something
again,
that
I see.
I would rather make sure that we don't have any sound issues, microphone
No,
issues.
no,
like-
that would be fine for sure. We never had that problem, did we?
It just happened right now.
No, this one. Yeah.
Somebody was messing with it.
No, because this place, their sound is coming down.
Yeah.
Everything is very good.
Or they're like,
Everything is, yeah, I was there. Yeah, there's one better in this. Yeah, I did. Just send me the daily news so I can use it. Good to see you. I'll see you after take.
Check, check. Check, check. Hello, 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 hello.
Welcome everyone. If you could make your way back to your seats, we're going to get started in just a minute here. So please make your way back to your seats and we'll get started in just a minute. Assalamu alaikum everyone. Assalamu alaikum. If you could please take your seats, we're going to go ahead and start the next part of the program. I'll just give you a moment. All right. So next up, I would like to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Professor Khaled Beydoun. Professor Beydoun is a law professor, author, and public intellectual. He serves as a law professor at Wayne State University, a scholar in residence at the Berkman Klein Center at Harvard University, and an associate director of the Damon J. Keith Center for Civil Rights in Detroit. Professor Beydoun is the author of the critically acclaimed book, American Islamophobia, Understanding the Roots and Rise of Fear, and co-editor of Islamophobia and the Law, published by the University of Cambridge Press. Professor Beydoun's academic work has been featured in top academic journals. His insights have been featured in the New York Times, the Washington Post, BBC, and ESPN. He served on the U.S. Commission for Civil Rights for 3 years and earned a coveted Open Society Foundation's Equality Fellowship. He has been named one of the 500 most influential Muslims of the world. His latest book, The New Crusades, Islamophobia and the Global War on Muslims, was just published and is available for purchase tonight. His book illustrates how converging systems of subordination, power, and violence related to Islamophobia are experienced across the globe. Professor Beydoun is a native of Detroit, Michigan, and holds degrees from the University of Michigan, the University of Toronto, UCLA, and Harvard. Please give a warm welcome to Professor Khaled Beydoun.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. It's great to be here in San Francisco. I was joking with Professor Hatem as to whether I should read the remarks that I prepared or whether I should speak from the heart and speak from the head. I'm going to try to do a little bit of both. But what I want to say first is to really highlight the work of the Islamophobia Studies Center and to really crystallize just how revolutionary, how trailblazing, and how visionary it is. The Islamophobia Studies Center is the first institution of its kind that is really emphasizing the importance, the real urgency of addressing Islamophobia, not only as a religious justice issue, not only as a racial justice issue, but very much a social and a legal justice issue. So I'm going to read the remarks that I wrote because I think that they're somewhat important. I took some time to prepare them on the plane, so I might as well read them, right? But before I do that, I want to share a couple of personal stories, right? So I met Brother Hatem when I was a law student in 2004. I was quite young. I was rough around the edges. I still wasn't one of the most 500, whatever it was, influential Muslims in the world. Maybe one of the 500 most infamous Americans in the world at that juncture. But what I quickly realized and what impressed me upon Professor Hatem when I first met him was that he was very much a visionary, right? He was kind of the academic, the intellectual that I saw myself possibly, maybe growing into one day, mainly because of his fearlessness. He was unapologetic. He was authentic about being Muslim at a time when it was really unpopular to do so, especially within the confines of academic institutions like UC Berkeley. So if not for professors and figures and leaders and trailblazers like Professor Hatem in the Islamophobia Studies Center, there'd be no Khaled Beydoun. There wouldn't be professors and academics and thinkers and authors like me daring to address Islamophobia because he paved the inroads. 15 years ago, 2008, I think it's 15, I'm really bad at math. Alhamdulillah, I became a lawyer instead. But nobody was talking about Islamophobia. Nobody cared about Muslim civil rights and civil liberties issues in 2008. Yet he was prescient enough, right? He saw the vision of establishing this institution, not at any university, right? At UC Berkeley, one of the landmark cornerstone academic institutions in this country. Before Islamophobia became a mainstream issue that everybody was talking about, before people on CNN, Fox News, and MSNBC, and BBC, and politicians were capitalizing on this term and this phenomenon to win political office, before the coming of a specific orange-skinned politician who became president, right, riding this wave of Islamophobia into the White House, Professor Hatem established an institution that we should all be proud of. And I don't want to use the word donate, right? The word is too tame. That word is not robust enough to highlight what we have to do as a community to invest, not donate, but invest in institutions like the Islamophobia Studies Center, because I'm going to be candid. I'm 42 now. I'm old, right? I'm a lot more honest than I used to be years before, but I'm going to keep it real with you guys. I'm from Detroit, and we like to be direct and unfiltered. I'm going to be honest with you guys. I just came back from New York. I gave a talk at Columbia Law School, presented my book, and at the end of my presentation, this guy stood up, right? Jewish professor, very famous constitutional law professor from Columbia Law School, raises his hand, asks me a question. I'm the only Muslim brown person in the room. I'm a law professor. I teach constitutional law, but I kind of sensed I knew what was going to happen with this exchange, right? It was going to be one of these really, common sort of dialectics that I typically engage in, right? Where a Zionist law professor is looking to kind of get me, right? He's going to say something to try to get me within a space that is his home base. I was on his home turf, the Columbia Law School, really Zionist institution, right? And I was this young, brown, relatively young, right, compared to other law professors, not young in the grand scheme of things. where he was trying to get me, and he asked me this question. He asked me, Professor Khaled, now isn't this term Islamophobia just a fake term that's been constructed to hide and guise fundamentalism being perpetrated by Muslims? Right? He's trying to like deconstruct, dismantle, right? This term, this verb, this noun, this engine that we have constructed to finally give face and do justice to the injustices that have been inflicted upon us, right? And I paused because I knew at that juncture all eyes were on me, right? Again, I wasn't in a safe space like this where it was Muslims and allies in the room. It was individuals who were largely there to kind of get me, right? They wanted to show me up, right? Again, remember, legal academia is 70% Zionist. You guys know what's going on at UC Berkeley right now with the Palestinian students. I do work in territory where I'm the enemy, where I'm always individually singled out by professors of this kind. So I paused because I want to get it right. I want to say something that Professor Hatem would say, you know, something that he would say or be proud of, or other heroes of mine would be proud of, people like Edward Said. And I paused and I said, that might be true, but if it were true, how about anti-Semitism? Is that also a political construction that's been devised and crafted by specific elements to justify the injustice that Israel is doing? Because in real time, while we're having this talk, this really cute Q&A at this bastion of academic elitism, Palestinian homes are being bulldozed. Mosques in India are being bulldozed. Uyghur Muslims are being genocided in real time. Now, if you want to call it Islamophobia or want to call it whatever term you choose, I told the professor, that's fine. But the term itself doesn't delegitimize, doesn't guise, doesn't make invisible injustices that are happening in real time right now in the world. So call it what you want, but I'm going to call it Islamophobia. And I'm going to stand on the research that the Islamophobia Studies Center has done for years. And I walked out of the room. Now, good news is I felt really good about myself. Bad news, I'm probably not going to get a job in the future at the Columbia Law School. Okay, so that's a lot to say. I want to read some of these words again because, you know, I want to do justice about the importance of the work that the Islamophobia Studies Center does and the kind of, again, trailblazing work it's done over the years to really inspire and empower not only academics and thinkers like myself, but to really build inroads so that Islamophobia is a serious, urgent, pressing topic of concern that everybody, again, should really reckon with and elevate as a topic of considerable importance. I am an Oriental writing back at the Orientalists who for so long have thrived upon our silence. The iconic Palestinian intellectual Edward Said wrote in his memoir, Out of Place. I remember reading those words for the very first time as a 16-year-old boy in Detroit, a son of parents who fled war, trying to find myself in a world that saw my name, that saw my race, that saw my faith as threatening. I did not know fully what those words meant when I first read them, what Edward Said was speaking of. But those words jumped off the pages, jeering me to sink into them even deeper. Orientalist and Occidental, I grappled with those words for the very first time. Edward Said, a Palestinian exile living at the margins of statelessness and media erasure, was talking about me. He was years before this war on terror and the New World Order it ushered in, talking about all of us. Muslim and Islam, Islam and Muslim, Palestinians and pariahs, Arabs and others, objects of suspicion, study, and scrutiny to be dissected on the pages of books, on television screens, and on movie screens by people who did not look like him, did not look like me, and did not look like any of us here in this room. He called them Orientalists, pundits who became Islamophobes in the modern moment, invested fully in maligning, in misrepresenting us, marginalizing us, infecting and injecting lies about us at every turn. Every turn of the page and every turn of the channel saw as a young man were Arabs and Muslims being reduced into objects of scorn, objects of scrutiny. We were seldom subjects of our own stories, humans brought into beings by our own hands, or masters of our own making. I flipped through those channels and the imperial images they propagated over and over again to find that Islam was always the villain of war, always the violent culprit committed to violence. These Islamophobes, or Orientalists as they were called then, had names like Bernard Lewis and Bill Maher, Francis Fukuyama, and Professor Hatem mentioned Samuel Huntington, who wrote The Clash of Civilizations. People on TV never had the names Zainab or Dahlia or Khaled or Hatem. I then flipped onto the front cover of the book that I held in my hands as a young man, and I saw a Palestinian who looked like me, spoke my native language, and saw Islam, my faith, for what it truly was. Those words that Edward Said wrote were no longer small black words on wide white sheets. They were commands, they were dictates, they were poems. They were a blueprint inspiring me forward toward a future where I, as a Muslim, could become the author of my own fate and not the object of somebody else's doing. Today, right now, I am a Muslim writing back at the Islamophobes who for so long have thrived upon our silence. I and we, sitting here today, are silent no more. Instead, we can be proud, we can be loud, because we have brothers like Professor Hatem Besayan in the Islamophobia Studies Center. Now, nearly 2 decades later, after reading those words for the very first time, I find my name, my own name today on the cover of books, and my experiences, my ideas, my thoughts inside of the pages within them. I'm a law professor, I'm an author, but before I was any one of those things, I was a Muslim first and foremost. A Muslim who for so long, and far too long, sat on the sidelines while vile actors sat on stages of influence, stages of government, academia, and media, who enacted laws like the Patriot Act and the Muslim ban, who told lie after lie about Arabs and Palestinians, Muslims and Islam, while we all sat there on the sidelines, silent, but silent and on the sidelines no more. Let's be frank, we as Muslims are far too strong to sit on the sidelines. And the truth of our deen is too potent, it's too powerful for us to remain silent participants and passive agents in the media and legal manufacturing of our own unmaking, especially now and especially today. I sit back and I see other communities building institutions, building departments, funding chairs, while we sit back and critique and complain. Criticism and complaint can only get us so far. It's high time for us to do the same. Build institutions, invest in centers, not only for our sake, but for the sake of our children. Tonight, we are all building blocks. We are bricks of a new vision, a new foundation. It is time for us to be proactive instead of just reactive. It is time for us to construct and not only critique, to take ownership of our narratives and end this existence of living as tenants within narrow stories crafted by landlords that revile our faces and relegate our faith. That day, inshallah, is nearing its end. My brother Hatem also mentioned that I'm a big sports fan. I'm a plump these days, but back in the day, I was once an athlete, right? I used to box. And 3 months ago, for those who follow me on social media, you may know that I was in Qatar. I was there. I had the good fortune of experiencing the World Cup in person and in real time. Let me tell you, that was a really magical experience, I'm sure, for all of us and for those of us here watching that tournament here at home. And let me tell you, as soon as I stepped off that plane, every step, right, every next phase and passage of that experience was transformative. It was eye-opening. There I was in 2022 inside of a Muslim country hosting the greatest sporting event the world has ever known. It was the grandest stage of football, soccer, Americans call it, the world's game, being hosted in the heart of the Middle East, the middle of the Muslim world. Now, still today, as I reflect on that experience, I still don't fully absorb or appreciate the significance of what took place when I was there. Because when I rushed from the airport to the stadium, just in time to watch Morocco's historic victory over Spain, I knew that something magical, that something divine was taking place, specifically because I was surrounded by Muslims in the stands And what they were doing was really revolutionary, right? We all saw it at home, the waving of Palestinian flags, the recitations of the Quran. There was like this big surge, this big tidal wave of being unapologetic about being authentic and freely flowing as Muslims in the heart of the Muslim world. I felt free over there, right? Every Arab, Palestinian, and Muslim I met inside of those stadiums and on the streets shared that sentiment. The sounds and sights of the Adhan, the kafiyah, the Palestinian flag, brown bodies and hijab were no longer symbols of suspicion like they are here in the United States, or objects of violence, right? They were sublime symbols of being, sublime symbols of Muslim identity in Qatar. They were multidimensional, real, and full of color and complexity. Islam was no longer tied to terrorism, and Muslims were no longer subjects of enmity. Muslims were valiant sons kissing the crowns of their mothers. They were proud mothers dancing with children they raised into champions. They were academics and engineers, journalists and children, taking in history inside of new passages of history that they were writing, that we were writing, authors of our own stories in Qatar and the World Cup, where we could be free, we could be us, and we could be Muslims. We were all mesmerized by the magic of the World Cup in Qatar, which was a passage of history far greater than football, far grander than sport. Now, the World Cup in Qatar offered a snapshot into the future. It foreshadowed what our life as Muslims, could look like if we took possession of our own fate, if we became authors of our own stories, if we became masters of our own history and architects of our own institutions. I feel like I'm giving a Sunday sermon or a Friday khutbah. I drank some of that. That chai is strong back there, so let me warn you guys. One of my favorite writers, Nigerian author Chinua Achebe, wrote this beautiful book. Young people, I recommend that you read this book. It's called Things Fall Apart, where one of the more salient quotes from that book, Achebe wrote, quote, "Until the lions have their own historians, histories of the hunt will always glorify the hunter," unquote. Let me read that again, right? Because that's one of the more sort of, that quote has been like etched, entrenched in my mind since I first read it. And despite having all these degrees, I'm not the smartest person in the room, let me tell you. Until the lions have their own historians, histories of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. You got that, right? Right? So you could kind of feel what the essence of that quote actually means. We have to write our own stories. And if we don't, we leave ourselves vulnerable and exposed to be the objects of another man's weaponized words. We have to craft our own histories, or else be victims of imperial, Orientalist, Zionist, Islamophobic myths. And when I speak to young people, I'm a law professor. All my students are in their 20s, younger or a bit older. Let me tell you this, young people are sick of being victims, right? They don't want to view their identity through this lens of victimhood anymore, right? We shouldn't view ourselves as victims. We're no longer victims or immigrants or newcomers. We're full-fledged citizens. We have as much claim to this country as any other people. Islam is not a foreign religion, right? But a faith that's deeply rooted in this country's soil. You may know that 1/3 of the enslaved Africans in antebellum America practiced Islam until slave masters and slave codes eradicated Islam. Islam came to this country before this country was a country. Palestinian identity is not a signal of terrorism, it's a symbol of self-determination. A symbol evident here in San Francisco and in Gaza and everywhere else in between, that if people denied their dignity will fight against all odds and against all foes. When Brother Hatem picked me up last night, we're driving into Berkeley where I was staying, we saw at least 2 or 3 signs by these Zionist organizations looking to criminalize these law students at UC Berkeley for organizing and standing up for the rights and the dignity of their people, right? Those signs are coming from highly resourced institutions perpetuating Islamophobia, making it hard for our young people to study law. They're going to be blacklisted from getting jobs as lawyers. And what's that going to do? It's going to have a chilling effect on the next generation to be vocal on issues like Palestine and Kashmir, what's happening in Afghanistan and what's happening in Pakistan and what's happening with Uyghurs in China, right? Do we want that future? Do we want our students, do we want our young children, our future generations to be fearful to voice their First Amendment rights? I teach the First Amendment. Do we want our young people to be fearful to say, I'm going to go pray in the middle of the day and find a space at the university where they could freely perform their prayers? Now, if we don't build institutions, that's exactly what's going to happen. Taking ownership of our stories is why I wrote this book, The New Crusades. To reclaim the story of Islamophobia and tell it through the eyes and experiences of real Muslims in places like China, again, where a genocide is unfolding right now in real time. In the disputed lands of Palestine and Kashmir, where Muslim life is being suffocated and stamped out day by day as the world turns a blind eye and media outlets remain silent. In places like Turkey, in Syria, like Brother Hatem mentioned, where 45 to 50,000 people have been killed in a span of 3 weeks, but can't get 3 minutes time media coverage, while a whole year-long round of media coverage is dedicated to Ukraine, right? And the Russian invasion in Ukraine, even though the death toll in Turkey and Syria is 5 times the size and scale of what happened in Ukraine, right? We see the contradictions. We see all the hypocrisy. We have to stop reacting. It's time for us to be proactive and build our own institutions where we can reckon and balance this injustice. I'm going to close soon, and I apologize. I mean, you guys all know, law professors, we can talk all night, we can be long-winded, but I want to leave you with kind of, I was talking to a young brother who's a law student back there at UC Davis about the future for young Muslims today, and we kind of put ourselves in this really difficult paradox where we don't have a political home, right? Where the left views our religion with suspicion and skepticism because we're a spiritual people, while this country moves from secularism to godlessness, right? Whereas the right, we all know what the right is doing to us, passing Muslim bans, white supremacy. We can't win with either side. We're stuck in this really difficult middle that we have to negotiate and navigate for us in the future. So even though we're talking about Islamophobia tonight, right, and I want you to invest heavily, again, not donate, but invest heavily in the Islamophobia Studies Center because it's an investment in your future as well. The mandate and the issue is far bigger than Islamophobia, right? The stakes are far higher than matters tied to politics or religion, policy, or community. Now look at this world that we inhabit, right? Step back and think about what's happening in the world in real time, in the place our children have to find a space and a location in the United States and the West that deems our religion as either uncivilized, threatening, terroristic, or backwards. Mainstream and especially social media is ripe with seductive traps and nefarious trappings. The lure of materialism, the allure of egoism, the mirages of fame and celebrity, wealth, and dunya are overpowering and everywhere. On the very screens, right? Pull up your telephones that our young people stare at for hours and have at the fingertips of their very hands. We don't offer an alternative, whether it's education or role models or leaders to emulate, like Brother Hatem. What world will our young people be submerged in, right? If we don't build our own academic institutions, now I'm going to say some names you guys might get mad at me for, but these voids will be filled by the likes of Andrew Tate and Jordan Peterson, right? The empty timelines of vain celebrities and vapid charlatans shaping their brains and shaming their identities. Our ability to be proactive is endangering our children. It's far bigger. The stakes are far higher than just Islamophobia. We have to be the thought leaders. We have to fill these voids with trailblazing individuals and transformative institutions for our children, for our future here as Muslims in the United States. Now, again, I want to close with this. The work of the Islamophobia Studies Center, again, is unprecedented. I've been teaching within legal academia, the belly of the beast, for a decade now. I see on a daily basis, on a routine basis, the entrenched influence, the institutional stranglehold that Zionists, that atheists, that Islamophobes have within these institutions and within the most elite institutions in the United States that we send our children to learn at, to get degrees from, and to prepare their careers and their lives moving forward. I'm going to leave you with this note. If we don't build our own institutions moving ahead, like other communities, specifically communities that we consider opponents and that we consider enemies, then we're doing ourselves a serious injustice. So don't just donate to the Islamophobia Studies Center. Invest in it, invest in yourselves, and invest in your children. Thank you.
Jazakumullah khair, Khaled. So we have a number of things that we need to do today. One is that no one should leave the room without buying one of the books of Khaled, Beydoun. And if you can give it as a gift in Ramadan, do so. And if we ran out of books in here, you still can purchase. Khaled, again, on his Instagram said that 1/3 of the sales of the book will actually be donated to the Uyghur in terms of humanitarian and support. So buying a book and promoting the book is one way that you could support the engagement with both the Islamophobia and the research. Second, you already know how to donate. So you have the QR code, but if you are old technology, we also have the envelope for you. So you could sign a check, sign your information in here. I urge you to do a monthly donation. So if you could donate an amount now, but if you could commit to just $20, $30 a month as a ongoing donation, we need to try to get about 1,000 donors that will be on a monthly basis. That will get us the steady support in that way. So two ways: immediate donation, if you could do so, and old technology, right? Filling the envelope and committing to a monthly donation. Now, the third, I want for us to also make sure that you pick a SWAT event that is taking place on May 27th. A SWAT with our dear sister Nabila Mango. They've been like really constantly supporting the Islamophobia work from the get-go. In many of our conferences in Berkeley, we end the conference often with a concert that Nabila and her SWAT team perform, not only to show the critique, but also to celebrate elements of Arab Muslim culture. So on your table, there is the concert, Baligh Hamdi, for those who know Egyptian music. Again, I'm not going to be singing. I'm going to be in ICNA convention in Baltimore, but I encourage everybody to be there. And I really thank everyone for coming and participating and helping out. But lastly, I want to really thank both Hani and Omar. Where is Omar? I have seen him in the back. So Omar is really our backbone in terms of marketing, response to your email, and all of your material. So most likely he's often the person that engaged. And then Hani makes much of our material beautiful through his design, layout, and so on. And usually we lend him to many organizations as well. I think nobody in the Bay Area except they know Hani's work. And then Zabad comes always to make the sound system for us. Jazakallah khair. I just call him and he say, I'm there, just tell me when. So these are really the individuals that make our work successful. So Jazakumullah khair for continued support and really partnership with the Islamophobia Studies Center. So Jazakumullah khair. Do you want to close, Iman, or should just close it myself? So Subhanakallahum hamdaka astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خير, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give you a blessed Ramadan, and may Allah accept all your fasting prayers and dua. So جزاكم الله خير.